there has now been injected a degree of partisanship, which is not only unfortunate, I think it's destructive of the fabric of the relationship.
National Security Advisor Susan Rice using some of the toughest language yet to criticize House Speaker Boehner inviting Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to speak to Congress on Tuesday. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Jason Riley from the Wall Street Journal, former Democratic Congresswoman Jane Harman, director of the Woodrow Wilson Center, Washington Post columnist Kathleen Parker, and Charles Lane also from the Washington Post. Well, we ask you for questions for the panel, and we got this on Facebook from Karen Margrave, who writes, what was the turning point for America where Israel became the enemy of the Democrats? What happened to respecting leaders that support America? Jason, how do you answer Karen? When did things turn so ugly between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, I think this has been building for some time. And, you know, Netanyahu is worried about the very existence of his country. And that is what is driving this decision to come here and address Congress. And foreign dignitaries have done this before. This is not unprecedented in any way. And we have to remember, like the questioner said, the enemy is Iran, not Israel. And I think those people who are making a show of boycotting this speech are giving comfort to the enemy in a sense.
Congresswoman Harman, you're a big, longtime supporter of Israel. Do you have any problem with Boehner inviting and Netanyahu accepting this speech?
Well, let me just say, giving comfort to the enemy is pretty strong. I don't agree with that at all. And I think Democrats in Congress love Israel, too. And our relationship with Israel depends on a strong bipartisan relationship. Having said that, if I were a member of Congress now, I would attend the speech. But I think that the timing and the process of setting up the speech was poor, and that Netanyahu would have been advantaged if he had decided in the last month or so to say, I will come after the election with the unity government. I'm sure I'll be part of that government. And he would look much more like a statesman. And that I told that exact view to Yuval Steinitz, his intelligence minister, who asked me a month ago what I thought he should do.
And what did he say?
He said he'd pass it along. He obviously, and then he said he had passed it along. Obviously, the prime minister doesn't agree. We are where we are. But the big deal is that Democrats and Republicans love Israel, and all of us care about the existential threat to Israel from Iran.
Well, and let me just say, because the real issue here isn't the speech. The real issue here is the nuclear deal that the West, that the U.S. and our 5 other allies, although China and Russia, I don't know if they're allies, but the 5 other countries are trying to negotiate with Iran. Here's what President Obama said about where that deal stands this week.
I gave the Emir an update and assured him that our goal here is to be able to verify that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
Kathleen, that's the concern, that where this began as an effort to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, now you hear the president talking about making sure that Iran doesn't, present tense, doesn't have a nuclear weapon.
Right. Well, it's all, you know, it's such a complex thing because the president long ago said we can't trust Iran to not try to pursue nuclear arms. We sort of understood that. Now we need Iran to support us in our pursuit of ISIS. So we've got multiple moving parts. As for Netanyahu's speech, I feel like it was his invitation to decline. And this is not the first time the House that Boehner, in fact, has invited Netanyahu to speak. Back in 2011, he asked, and he went to the White House and specifically asked whether that would muck up what were then sensitive Iran negotiations. And the White House got back, well, it didn't get back for an entire month. And then when they did, the response was, it's up to you. You know, we're going to leave it in your court. So this time, I don't think Boehner felt like they had to consult with the president. They did give the White House a heads up before they announced it, albeit only an hour before. But, you know, all this distress over the protocol is sort of missing history here, I think.
Well, I would just add, this is not, Republicans aren't the only ones concerned about this deal. The top-ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Robert Menendez, is also concerned about this deal. The idea that this is just a partisan effort to go after Obama is not true. Congress is a co-equal branch of the government. If the administration is so confident that this deal is so airtight and its arguments are so forceful, why is it afraid for Congress to hear another perspective?
Well, let me bring in Chuck, because let's get off the speech and talk about the deal. And what do you see happening here? Because it seems to me that as this plays out, this could get very dicey. What if Congress imposes more sanctions? What happens on March 24th if they do or they don't get a deal? And if all of this falls apart, are we prepared to go to war?
Well, the March deadline is really a kind of an interim squishy deadline because the ultimate cap is June, when supposedly the thing would all
Right, but the
fall.
president has said
And he has
we've got
said
to have a
wanna
sense
have
that there's
frame by-
an agreement in principle.
Right. Now, already they've disarmed, so to speak, Congress a little bit because the bill to impose additional sanctions was withdrawn, and they're not going to do that. The next piece of legislation that's in the works is one that would give Congress a say. This has been this is a bipartisan bill that's moving in the Senate. Give Congress a say on the final deal. To me, the key element of this whole thing is going to be what happens to the sanctions, to all the sanctions, including the UN Security Council sanctions. If those are all removed as at the beginning of the deal, as opposed to
No, I think it's supposed to be phased in.
that's what Obama wants.
Right.
That's what the U.S. is insisting on. But if the Iranians won't agree to that, then the deal will fall apart, and then we will be left with nothing in June.
The new legislation was just introduced Friday. It's a new Corker-Menendez bill, and it basically removes the president's ability to waive a limited amount of sanctions during the first 60 days after the deal. It says Congress will review the deal, and they will decide whether that waiver is okay or to add sanctions.
The White House wants to keep Congress out of this.
Well, Congress can't be kept out of it. I actually think that's a pretty strong idea, better than the one they had, which is Congress is at the negotiating table. That's unprecedented. But this way, I think this actually could strengthen the administration's hand in getting a better deal. And there needs to be a strong deal or no deal.
You know, I think we've been going in, we're in the weeds a little bit. Let's step back and look at the big picture here. What has happened? The United States and Israel are at each other's throats. Republicans and Democrats are at each other's throats. The United States and our Sunni Arab allies are at each other's throats. The countries within the Sunni Middle East are at each other's throats. The only person who's sitting back watching all of this, very happy about all this division, is Iran. And at some point, this process got out of control and started generating a tremendous amount of conflict and division among the U.S. and its allies. By the way, some of the European countries, France is not terribly happy about the way this negotiation is going. So at some point, President Obama is going to have to start moving in the direction of pulling all his people back together, lest the deal fall apart, we get nothing out of it on the nuclear side, and Iran has managed to divide us in a lasting way.
Obama's very uncomfortable playing that role. I think he sees the U.S. as the biggest force of instability on this planet, and that's a problem. He's uncomfortable being the leader of the free world, and it has both our allies and our enemies worried. It's not just Iran that notices this. Netanyahu notices it, which is why he's coming over here. Putin notices it. I think he is fundamentally uncomfortable in this role, and that's a problem.
I agree with you. That's true.
I disagree. I think he's trying to build the biggest coalition possible against ISIS and doing a pretty careful job of that. We had a visit last week from the Emir of Qatar, who's in that coalition and trying, I know there's a lot of skepticism still, but trying to make clear that they're against terror gifts to terror organizations and that they have cracked down on this. But at any rate, I think that Obama understands America as an indispensable partner in this entire region, and figuring out the way forward is hard.
Kathleen Parker, final word. Do you think that the president's getting played by Iran? That he's more anxious for this deal than everybody else is?
Well, I don't know if I would say that he's getting played by Iran, but I think he's not taking into consideration all the facets of this that he should be. And as to his willingness to be a leader in this, I think it comes down to a difference of approach in all things. I mean, President Obama is just much more attuned to the round table where we all sit down and sort of, you know, hash things out together, whereas Israel is under existential threat at all times. And so you can't bridge that gap, I don't think, except to look to the leadership question. Obama could have said about Netanyahu, fine, let him speak, I want to meet with him. What's wrong with that?
It's a very good question. All right, we have to take a break here, panel. We'll see you a little bit later.